think of 3 employees you've had over the years that if everybody's the exact same way, you could take over the world, list their names, ask them to write down the attributes that you think of with these 3 people, and then you just do it like a keep, kill, combine, and it comes out typically right. And then it's just facilitation, of helping them dig into the real words, and then helping them understand the words they're using can help them create a shorthand for managing and leading.
Welcome to Confessions of an Implementer. I'm your host, Ryan Hogan. We share unique stories of EOS implementers and the companies they've transformed to give you a rare glimpse into the successes and challenges of the system in action. Let's jump in. There's a couple things to start with here. I guess one is oh, you already have it in your thing. I thought you were going to put Walt Brown, but you put Uncle Walt. Where does Uncle Walt come from?
Oh, I don't know. Early on, EOS client is a big industrial rigging company with like 1,800 hard hats. And I'm in there, and the president's name was John Wilson. And I think I was reading from like one of Lencioni's books. And John says, "Read to us, Uncle Walt." It's like, "What do you mean by Uncle Walt, John?" He goes, "Well, you're just that loving uncle. You show up every now and then. You're not afraid of putting your arm around our shoulder and maybe telling us something we don't want to hear. And you'll give us some good information. But at the end of the day, you leave, and we don't have to pay attention to anything you say." Which is the perfect example of an implementer. I mean,
Yes,
that's Uncle Walt.
That's it's so funny. Like you took that as endear. Like I would have been like, you could have stopped right before that last sentence, and I would have felt really good about myself. But you're like, no, that's what I do. Come in and speak the truth and help companies out, and then I get out of the way so they can go execute.
Yeah, and it's their choice of whether they execute or not.
That's true. What do you I feel like this is a contested statement. So you and we were sitting, somehow we got on the rooftop bar and we were having a wonderful evening. And there's some debate over what number implementer you are.
Okay, we did talk about that. So number 3.
Wait a minute. What?
Don is 1, Mike Payton is number 2, and then Renee and I were in the same class. So it could be 2, 2.5, 3, whatever. But who had clients first? So I got clients for Renee. Who freaking cares? But it was really cool to be in that freak show with. I remember showing up in Gino's room and looking around. He got Gino and Don Tenney, who are a little bit wonderfully, beautifully odd, and these like 4 other people. Renee, who had been spending his whole life in like Pizza Hut, and then like these 3 like random dudes. Actually, wasn't that random? Maybe I'd be number 4, but Dwayne Marshall. And I remember going out into the hallway the very first break, and Peyton was like the only seemingly normal guy. He had his little sweet little dapper, jacket that he always wears. And I said to him, "Mike, you can't leave me. Don't leave." So I thought he was normal. Then I realized that none of us are normal, and we're all like a bunch of freaks in that room. But no, I don't know if that made any sense or not, Ryan. But what a cool story right off the bat. Yeah. Number 3 is what I call myself.
That's awesome. All right, so we got that situated at least this time. Number 3
of people who still are active and didn't bolt. Dwayne Marshall bolted.
What about when I went to your LinkedIn profile? So I have conversations like this every now and then, and I'll do some research ahead of time. For you, I read a book, and so I'm excited to talk about that, and we're going to promote the heck out of Attract to Repel. There's some things I really like about this book. I mean, I love the book, but there's some things you key in on when it deals with culture. And like when I've gotten hiring wrong in the past, it wasn't because I was illiterate or couldn't read a resume. It was literally because I brought the wrong person into the organization. But before we get into that, I opened up your LinkedIn profile, and one, it's beautifully set up. So if you have an agency that's running that, I'd like a flyer on their card.
You're giving me a hard time.
Well, now I am. I'm leading up to the hard time. You have 25 different experiences. So number 2 implementer, where did this story all start for you?
I came out of school as an accounting and statistics guy. I always thought I wanted to go into my own business. I didn't want to become an MBA. So I was like, well, I'll just do accounting because you get to see a lot of different stuff. I did 4 years as an auditor with Ernst and Young, Ernst and Winnie. And then in that 1986, I took the IQ exam and I scored low enough and I was allowed to start my own company. And then that turned into, 4 companies that specialized in like importing, marketing, and distributing things to really high net worth companies with like a focus on people who race sailboats and people who show horses. And then that just led to, that was 20 years. Those would have been 4 of the heavy experiences, just a lot of cool stuff there. So then sold the companies, started coaching, and then that led to a discovery of this and a discovery of that types thing. So I guess those are the experiences, Ryan. And now here we are.
Now here we are. Well, like, were they all beautiful experiences? Hockey stick growth up and to the right. You hired all the right people.
Oh no, I had one horrible thing. I think I still have it on there. I was after selling my companies. You have best friends, some guys I've race sailboats with, really, really close friends. We got involved in this thing called the Blue Ocean Fishing Club. I don't know if anybody's read the book, The Blue Ocean Strategy. Pretty cool book. And it was an angel network, and we were putting money into companies, and we put a bunch of money into a wastewater treatment solution. Fascinating worlds, wastewater. Well, I got called in to turn it around, kind of as a half-time, part-time CEO. And if you're turning something around, you're probably arguing with the board a little bit. And just be careful, folks. When you find that out there, man, that board's looking for a chance to whack you upside the head with a 2x4. So I got whacked with a 2x4 by my best friends. Just, fired a CEO. We had turned it around. It was just arguments. But, that's the negative. Not everything is beautiful, right? Turnarounds are hard.
Turnarounds are really hard, and like now I'm fascinated. And unfortunately, I've been in some turnaround situations for my own companies. One we were unsuccessful and unfortunately bankrupted. I'm curious to hear, like, when you walked into that turnaround situation, like what was your number one goal? Like walking through the door, you're like, I got to get this done in order to like start this process.
Well, this was a new technology in a very like backwards world, and we just had to get trials running in wastewater treatment plants. So you got to get it out there. And one of the primary driver money people behind it had owned a Budweiser distributorship. And I don't know if you know anything about Budweiser distributorships, but they make a 32% margin. They get paid cash on the barrelhead, and they get 45 days to pay for their inventory. So it's an infinite cash machine. And then I was like, in order to get this going, we got to get these trials in here, and if we can just at least get the people to pay what our cost is to get the product into the wastewater treatment plant, we're golden. And we had that goal. We had that going. So we had invested a lot in inventory, and so we were turning the inventory to get the cash out, if that makes any sense. So my 2 goals were to get the cash out of the inventory by putting in the trials and pilots, and we got that rolling. But there were some other things that just got in the way of, this. You got to make money. Well, you can't force people to buy something that hadn't been proven, especially in that world. It's made up of lots of municipal employees who are very risk averse.
And it sounds like there was a falling out at a certain period. Was that what the board was pushing for? Was great. Like, you figured out some of this stuff, but now we need to make money.
Yeah. And I was like, well, there was this huge, not seeing eye to eye on things, but just, so have you ever gone around and raised money?
Yeah, we raised 12 million in equity and about 30 million in debt at my last company.
Yeah. I mean, so you're going out there and you're talking to people. It's a horrible place to be. I never want to be back in that world again. Just mean green, just, oh, it was tough. So, and you think you're doing the right thing and you're trying to help. And next thing you know, it just, geez, how did I get myself mixed up in all this kind of crap? And the money comes a calling. It wasn't anything negative, but I felt good because I was CPA accounting guy. So I would hand this board every single month. I would hand the board a statement of income statement, balance sheet, statement of changes, and the reconciled bank account to the freaking penny every month. So it was like, there was no question where like money was going and all that kind of stuff. A lot of these guys can't even read a freaking income statement or balance sheet or even understand you have a statement of changes. Am I saying this publicly? Damn it.
I like as you're talking, like I'm getting you're bringing up a lot of like old memories, because like for one, fundraising for us, like that became my primary job at the time. And the debt that we raised, by the way, like we weren't carrying that on the books. We just every time we got a little bit better, then we could go out and get a different interest rate. So like we started with like the crazy ones, a little less crazy. We got into mezz, and we would just constantly roll it down. But what you just said there, like one, that was my full-time job for like 3 years. Like, there's leading the company, there's running the company, but when you are fundraising, like that's your job. You're jumping on flights and just like going.
It's horrible. It's a horrible life, because then you get a little bit of money and you try to run the business, and then you're out looking for more. I mean, it was just really, it was really difficult. I got a lot of respect for people out there who do it. It's hard work.
You still friends with them today?
No, lost my relationships, which is probably the world working in the right direction for me. So. Thanks for scratching that, Scab.
My only goal here on the show is to try and get you emotional, so it's not working yet.
The cool thing about that, to bring it back to Confessions of an Implementer, so this happened right before July 4th. I'm going on family vacation, and it went down, and I called Don Tenney. So I left EOS for like 18 months.
Oh, wow.
During this period. And I called Don Tenney. He said, Don, will you have me back? He says, oh, heck yeah, man. See you in August. That's pretty cool. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. Well, I was going to, so we are actually let me see if you're beating, we're pretty much tied with where Dan Wallace was. And there's actually questions coming in. And so I would give you this long drawn out story about my situation actually happened the day before July 4th. And basically like investors committed, then they pulled out, then my board blocked something. But it sounds like you and I both have some scar tissue there. So Cam just came in, Cam Lawson, who obviously you're familiar with.
He's a paid contributor, so he might not count the competitive competition with Dan Wallace.
He's he wants to know about the 7 critical needs and how that correlates with EOS. So let's jump right into the book at that point. So you've got a book, and it's called Attract or Repel. I love this book because it's the fundamental of, if you understand your culture and you live and breathe it, then you're naturally going to attract the right people, and you gotta get rid of the wrong people. So talk to me about like where this came from. Like, was this all your 25 experiences on LinkedIn? Is this just the culmination of just things that you've observed and that you've seen over time?
Yes and no. So I'll give you the origin story. That makes sense. So you can't see my session room here, but if you could, you would see the pictures of sailboats and trophies and all sorts of stuff. So I raced sailboats for most of my life on teams, boats with 8 people, like 17 people. So, and before that, I played football, and you just get an understanding of what a championship team feels like. And that's a lot of what we're doing in the world of EOS. Is, are you creating a championship team? And so after selling my companies and hanging my shingle as like an executive coach, I got a phone call from Gallup, and Gallup was looking for coaches, and they were running like a pilot program to see if they could get coaches to like roll out their Q12 questions of employee engagement. I don't know if you've ever seen Gallup's Q12 or not, but they're the big boys. And so, it's been a year underneath the umbrella of Gallup while doing some other stuff, really understanding employee engagement on the statistical side and like on their psychological side. And then I got a phone call. I was on my mountain bike one day, and it was Don Tenney calling just out of the blue. And so he kind of got recruited into EOS, went out there and got trained. And so the whole time I've been doing EOS, I'd seen it early through the lens of the Gallup's Q12. Does that make sense? I don't know if that was clear what I was just saying there. Through that lens. And then in 2014, at about client number 72, 76, was back when everybody was complaining about millennials. I don't know if you remember that time or not, but they're just complaining. And I sat back and looked at all of my clients and like, I don't see that going on with them. Their millennials are completely destroying the mold, just breaking the stereotype. And so what I did is I asked my clients if I could go in and do like focus groups with their millennials. And what came back was these folks, there were about 100 of them across the whole piece, plus the clients I was working with at that time. And it was like, what EOS is doing is it's defining these 7 things that are really important for me to know whether I'm bought in at work or not. It's defining what it means to belong. It's defining what they're asking me to believe in. And it's defining clearly what I'm accountable for. And it's defining how I'm being measured. Rubrics, millennials, zillennials, whoever. It's defining how I'm heard. It's defining how I can step into my own development. And it's defining for me whether I can be balanced or not. And it's just came into the 7 critical needs. It's just like, well, there it is. Then you start turning that into a survey and you start putting statistics behind it and experiences. So that's where the 7 critical needs came from. That flow of work.
Interesting. And so what are those 7 critical needs?
Can you see behind me on the board, or are they turned upside down?
Oh, no, it's right. It's right side. Yeah. Go you.
The 7 critical needs. And if you notice the EOS process on the other side, but the need to belong, which basically in the world of EOS, we're defining what the core values are, and we're also defining what the skills are that tie to the roles that we need to make the business go forward. The need to believe. It's like, this is what our plan is. This is our product. This is what our purpose, our cause, our passion is. This is what we're going to be best in the world at. I mean, just going through the VTO, this is where we're going to be in 10 years. This is who our sweet spot customer is. This is where we'll be in 3 years, 1 year out. This is where we're going to be. And then the next 90 days is going to be focused on these things. Do you see the plan? Yes. Do you believe? Can you believe in that? And then we jump into understanding and embracing what you're accountable for as it ties to this thing you're being asked to believe. And you take that another level further and you're saying, okay, do you understand how you're measured against what you're accountable for that ties to what you're being asked to believe? And then how can you bring your voice to the table and add and contribute to around what you're accountable for and what you're being asked to believe in? And then how can you be involved in your own development around these things that you're bought in like everybody else? How can you get better along with everyone else? So they need to be developed. And then ultimately it's the need to be balanced. So, work, life, money. And all we're trying to say with these and through EOS or any operating system that's worth its salt, define how much time the job takes and be honest with it. This set of roles takes this many hours a week and it pays this much. So you're putting it out there and it's like a promise, Ryan. In order for a promise to have any power, it has to be accepted. So you as an employer are saying, this is what the deal is. Are we on the same page? Yes, I understand those as promises and we'll come on in. Kind of went off on a little tangent there, but those are the 7 critical needs.
Got it. And I am going to get to the promise. That was actually one of the things that I've got earmarked in here for today is this idea of the promise. Because I think that was a really kind of powerful thing, especially you positioned it as far as like the recruiting and the hiring process. And one of the promises you make before they ever join the team. Before we get to that though, which like, is there one that you're like, this is the most important? Are they all equal? Like what have you seen through this journey?
Well, it's the baseline is that if we talk about being positively aligned with each of the 7 critical needs, and if any of them are not aligned or not, you're not, if somebody's saying, well, if I was on a scale of 1 to 10, giving my satisfaction with this particular need, if they're giving it a 6, that's a negative, like net promoter score. It's a negative. And 1 is enough to trigger the person. It's just, I'm not balanced, or I'm not being heard, or, I don't know how I'm being developed. It just depends on, different people force rank these in different ways, Ryan. You might be on a career path and you're really interested in knowing what you're accountable for and measured and and getting really good at a certain trade, and you're willing to kind of suck it up with regards to maybe believing in the product or fitting into the culture. You want to be all in there, but that question gets asked all the time, and I'm not sure that there is one primary one.
That's so interesting because, like, for some reason, like you just kind of turned it around. Like my perception had been like from the company. So like, when the company receives these results, like what does it mean? And it's really interesting how you just shifted the perspective there to the actual teammate. Like you just said like they may value different things differently. And so then how would you reconcile that? Meaning like when you go to a company and you have them take the assessment and you're sitting down with the leaders of that organization and you're kind of going over the assessment results and things like that, like how do you debrief that, or what do you debrief to say like these are the areas we need to work on based upon the results that we're seeing?
Well, it's in a lot of ways you're debriefing to strengthen the things you're actually good at. But the survey comes back with people scored on a scale of 1 to 10, and we look at like an 8.5, a 9 or 10 is positive, and like a 7 and a 8.5 is like neutral, and anything below negative. But one of the things we encourage is anonymous, is they actually write a lot of comments. So the individuals are writing comments, and along with that comment is the score they gave, which gives you a lot of information. So they could be writing something, and you'll see whether they were a 6 or a 7 coming in. And I don't know if I made any sense there, Ryan, but it's got a lot of like detail up underneath it. Uh, but the beauty of this thing is when we like Don Tenney's really gotten involved heavily into the 7 critical needs, and we're pushing it in, trying to get it in as an official trust builder. That's November 10th. It's a decision that Kelly and Mark got to make, but they challenged us, Don and I, going out to vet the 7 critical needs. And one of the things we talk about in the world of EOS is vision, traction, healthy. And vision's pretty easy, traction's pretty easy, but how do you measure healthy? And so we're saying a healthy organization is one where all of the 7 critical needs are being met by all of the people. Right. So if you say these are the needs, it's essential they have to be met, and then you have to step back and say, it's essential that we have a really simple way to measure it and get responses back. That's like the second essential. And the third essential is we need to be able to respond through the tools of our operating system. Well, in my case, we're using EOS. Can you respond through the pure EOS process, through the rhythms of quarterlies and level 10s? Can you respond through the pure use of the tools? I get annoyed at the word pure, but at the end of the day, if you look at the purity of the tools, is how well they support each of the 7 critical needs. So you can look at IDS, for instance, as a tool, and you think further out in the organization. It doesn't have to be inside of a perfect level 10. It's just, are you honoring the person to allow them to be able to IDS what's going on inside their own situation or their own job, to be heard and be developed and to be balanced? Am I making sense at all in terms of that? So it's just and so our debrief is, yes, let's figure out what's going on, but the real power of the debrief is what tools are you not using that are part of your operating system that you need to double back down on. And then a lot of the debrief is just about messaging with the company is, hey, here was a survey, this is what we heard, and the way we're going to take action is through the tools of our operating system. We're doing this thing EOS for you, not to you. It just makes the whole thing come alive.
For the believing, like let's say they believe in kind of where the company's going, or let's say they score really highly. Is there ever a time where you've like approached the assessment and like the belief in the company did not correlate with the VTO? And I guess what I'm trying to get at here is there a way, or do you analyze, because the deeper inside of an organization you go, generally, like it's like the game of telephone. The harder the message is to get deeper into the organization. Um, do you ever see like a disparity between like someone has a deep belief in the company but doesn't quite understand like where the company's going or some of these other things, but they kind of don't know what they don't know.
Well, what you find more is like, especially with an EOS run company, where the company's out putting the VTO out in front of them, and the employees don't see the company living into living into what they put out, and then, so they're calling crap on it. Right? They pointed out, man, it's pretty it's pretty cool. Because it's you can't think further out. The guy driving the forklift probably has more time to think about this than the person running accounting. So that person has they're living a life. They have kids. They have a family and a car and a mortgage. They're thinking just as much as anybody else. Just their probably circumstance in life didn't allow them to maybe go to college or something like that. But they're still super. These needs are still just as important to them as everybody else. And you start putting it out there, ask them, tell them about what they believe, and you start telling them what your focus is and your purpose. They'll call you out on it. That's what you're asking. Yeah.
What's interesting about that, Cam and I talked to Cam this morning. And so him and I just had a conversation that was really similar to this. So even at Talent Harbor, like we're always placing small bets, and the feedback that I'm getting, especially from coaches, is like, guy, you got to focus the organization, just get really good at one thing, and then let kind of some of these other things come naturally. And so like I'm trying to not do that anymore. But what's interesting about what you just said is like, I enlisted in the Navy in 2002, and I was an enlisted air crewman. And one of your first jobs, if you're in the 53 community, is standing in this position called long cord, which is basically there's this long cord and you plug it into your helmet, this one that's right behind me, and you stand in front of the helicopter while it's on the ground, and you just make sure that the scene is safe. If you're doing something called a functional check flight, you could be standing out there for like 4 hours with the bird spinning, and you're just listening to the pilots talk back and forth. And I remember like how much time I had to think. I would dream and I would think about all the things. And so it was really interesting about what you just said. Like we kind of had a misstep at Talent Harbor with one of the business lines that we recently introduced, and Cam was given a situation where he was able to look around and be like, hey, like I can see things. What's interesting is like the guy driving the forklift like might have the right answer for where the company needs to go, and everybody else is so busy just being productive and doing things that they're missing it.
Right. Sure can. And that forklift driver is a lot of times is talking to guys that are delivering products to 6 different competitors. I mean, sometimes your delivery drivers can see more out there in the world than you can from a marketing standpoint. They're backing up to your competitors every day and seeing what's going on. Right? It's amazing how we don't listen to those guys, but those guys are thinking. And it's like you charge them with an idea or a thought, or hey, why don't you report something you thought was important that you saw in one of the places you loaded with this week? Bring it back. It's just little simple stuff like that.
Have you ever done one of these assessments and like you could just tell immediately that like it was a toxic culture, like everything was jacked up inside of the organization?
Well, I can usually tell that from the leadership team even before it goes out. I mean, right? The sort of the sad part about it is you don't see that often, Ryan, because if you've got the guts, the balls to do a survey like this, you care already. So you don't get the opportunity to really see the negative underbelly because those guys are too afraid to actually lift the kimono and see what's underneath there.
That's a great point. Like some of our best clients, they run on EOS, and what does that mean? It means they have a growth mindset. It means like they're looking to learn. I've heard a lot about like the speakers that go on kind of the Vistage trail. Like they love Vistage CEOs because just the fact that like they're taking a day a month out of their workday, like they have a different mindset on business and professional development.
Yeah, anybody who's been involved in a peer group is a good prospect for anybody who's putting anything out there. 5-7 EOS because they're willing to learn. Got enough scars. Typically, I find that's not the 32-year-old guy. That's the 38 to 42-year-old is where you start to realize that you don't have it all figured out.
Yeah, I showed up to my first Vistage meeting in flip flops, and it was February of in Baltimore. So yeah, I've since learned and grown. What what are some of the signs? So let's say you walk into a leadership team and one of the things that's interesting that you just said was like, I can tell pretty immediately, like if the company has their crap together or not. What are some of the things that like you'll see and you'll immediately be like, there's going to be an issue here? And the reason that I asked this question, not to like dig into all of those things, but I asked this question because like maybe there's leaders that are sitting on a team that don't even know what they're looking for or not seeing it themselves. And so like, what are some of those observations?
Yeah, I think what you said is, what are you seeing when you walk in? There's a unique perspective. Remember, I did 4 years of audit for Ernst and Winnie, Ernst and Young. So I mean, I was inside of the office doing financial audits, and it's amazing. And so, and I was doing a lot of like manufacturing and really hard stuff. So it wasn't just like an insurance company with a bunch of numbers with no product. You were in there, you're doing inventories, and you could walk into an office and almost know immediately whether this company was profitable. You just tell the way they were organized. Some of them were kind of crazy, sloppy, but they were profitable. Other ones were like really buttoned up and they're profitable. So that was sort of its, you know, and you're interviewing the CEO, you're interviewing the CFO, you're doing a lot of work with like the people who are now on your leadership team. So you're sitting there. Remember that 1,800 person company I talked about? The At the very beginning, we are talking about Uncle Walt. Uh, my firm used to audit them. And I used to have to go in and talk to the Mr. Johnson and argue with him about whether the receivable was going to be received or not to stay on the financial statements. Then end up working with his son, and he was still on the board. And it's pretty cool, Mr. Johnson. But that's a little bit of a tangent. But you go into EOS. One of the things that EOS does super well, and really the need for the 7 critical needs, is EOS forces upgrades to the leadership team. It absolutely smokes people out that can't carry their weight or are wrong fits or not bought in. It cleans that team up, just naturally. And probably 80% of the time, you got an 8-person team. 2 of those people aren't going to be there in a year. And a lot of I'm sorry, I'm going off a little bit here. This is more like lessons to implementers. One of our goals when we go in here and we're trying to help this person run this company and live the EOS life, our goal is to make sure that in a year we're doing this first 2-day annual, that we haven't screwed those 2 days up by allowing 2 people to be on that leadership team that shouldn't be there. When we start going through team health, we can't allow that to happen. And we don't have to do the forcing. We just have to use the tools to shine the light to help those people either self-select out or help the team owner make the decision to let the person go on down the road. But you can see it. It's in the body language. They're dropping like this. A lot of times they're just really good pointers outs of problems as opposed to being solvers. And the team just ultimately gets freaking tired of it.
All right, quick break, friends. Do you find it impossible to hire and retain top sales talent? Or worse, are you paying insane recruiter fees who are all using outdated hiring processes? Yeah, I was too. At Hunt to Killer, we were spending hundreds of thousands on recruiter agency fees. And after I sold that company in 2025, I started Talent Harbor. And the whole vision here was to make sales recruiting accessible to small and medium-sized businesses, because the organizations that can hire and retain world-class people are the ones that ultimately win. Most organizations rely on things like ZipRecruiter or LinkedIn, and they get hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes. But we find that the best salespeople are already perfectly placed somewhere else. And that's why our approach is to go after them. And we do that through a business model called recruiting as a service. We do not charge commissions. We do not have success fees. We don't have contracts. We don't have long-term engagements. And we become an extension of your team as expert sales recruiters. If you're tired of the same old recruiters and want to actually grow your sales team, check us out at talentharbor.com. That's Talent Harbor, TALENTHARBOR.com. Let's get your next sales superstar hired. Rob Toomey has a question for you. I think this is a good one. He says, have you ever taken the leadership team down to the factory floor to learn from the people, the workers, the drivers on the front lines?
I have not, because we always meet off site, Rob. But that would make a lot of sense. But in essence, we're taking them on I know Rob real well, so that's why we take them on a virtual journey down to the factory floor, riding on the magic carpet of the assessment, Rob.
Nice, nice. Um, what if you have a company and they are they're giving out this survey and they get all high remarks? Like, are you just like, hey, good to go, and this is great, or is there always something in there where you're able to say like, we can optimize even further?
That's a great question, but like a little story that reminds me there is it was more of Chris Dawson. Coach Dawson was working with this one client, and this one client had, I don't know, 4 or 5 locations, and one of the locations was staffed by a whole bunch of Chinese Asians, and there was like 50 people in that location. And they all came back with tens because their culture doesn't give negative feedback to ownership. If that makes any sense. But I thought that was kind of a funny story. There's things like do I understand, embrace what I'm accountable for, always comes back high the first time through, because the question is, are you accountable? Yes, I'm accountable. No, we're asking, do you understand what you're accountable for? Uh, there's never anything that's a perfect score. There's always something to work on. But still, it's even if they are all perfect scores, Ryan, it's like, hey guys, this is what we heard. We want to make sure it keeps going. We're going to double down on these tools. It's communicating.
Yeah. And that's probably a great segue to one of the other things that I read in the book that I thought was absolutely brilliant. And I won't bore everybody with the details of all of my hiring challenges and hiring woes. But you talk about this thing called a promise, and you touched on it earlier. But like, I really saw that as there's there's something very kind of core and very deep to that. So what is the promise, and just kind of walk us through how you think through that?
Yeah. So are you ready to go deep with Uncle Walt? It's just, people always tell me I make things too complicated, but so I'll try not to. It's the study of a promise. So the 7 critical needs used to be called the 7 questions, 7 promises, and then that was hard for people to get their heads around. So that's just the 7 critical needs. And when one thinks about a promise, there's a couple of lessons. Is in order for a promise to actually have any power, it has to be accepted by the promisee. So I'm making a promise to you, Ryan. I'm the promisor. You're the promisee. You have to accept that. Okay. And then once you accept it, in order to build trust, we need to constantly keep that promise. Two of the lessons. The other thing that happens, all these thoughts don't all come from me. I'm brain cramping on who I lifted them from. But if you ask me to give you a ride home, Ryan, and I promise to give you a ride home, I've actually given up some of my rights to you for you to hold me to that promise. So it's a real subservient type of thing when you actually are making promises to folks. You got to pay a lot of attention to the promises that you're making and the promises that you're accepting. And if you can live in a world where you're paying attention to the promises that you're making and then seeing if the person accepts them and then work to keep them, and the promises that you're actually accepting and then work together to keep them, you get rid of a lot of just the chaos in the world. So in our world, we're making a promise. We want to create a place where you belong. And we're going to surround you with people who have these core values. Pay attention, because I'm going to tell you what these core values are, and they're a high standard. And if you can live into these, it's going to be nirvana. If you can't, it's going to be hell on earth, because I'm making a promise to you. I'm going to surround you with people who have these values. And if you don't have them, I'm going to clean up the herd. Are we on the same page? That's my promise. This is hard comment. You're not pulling them in by lovey-dovey stuff. You're being really clear to them about who you are and who you're not.
What is this like? Where in the conversation? So let's say it's a hiring conversation. Actually, this is going to be a 2-parter. In the hiring process, where is this promise best delivered? And if you haven't implemented this kind of like promise philosophy into your organization, then should you go back individually, one-on-one with everybody, and make that commitment?
Yeah, that's that's what EOS is trying to get us to do. And you got to go back and do the cleanup. But the whole idea is we're trying to start at the front gate. You're talking about core values. It comes from me. I was I was doing this before with my companies. I would say to people, hey, man, before you even think about coming in here, let me tell you about what our core values are. Positive, cheerful, and cognizant. Number one, I want people that I'm surrounded with every day to be positive. I want them to have a cheerful attitude, but at the same day, I want them to be aware and cognizant. If shit's hitting the fan, you don't have to be like lovey dovey positive, but pull it back together. And we've got two more core values. It's challenge your work and three questions first. And so once you've proved us you can do the work, we want you to challenge it. We aren't going to adopt the status quo there. And then three questions first. Slow down and ask three questions. Don't come in here if you can't believe that. And the other thing we do is we're just using my examples. We believe that our customers only have a finite number of weekends. And we are absolutely protecting their weekends and their Fridays. If you're in doubt about a decision, you're getting that thing out to them by Friday. It's just stuff like that up front. And you're saying to them, go home and think about this stuff, and then tell me tomorrow whether you think we want this job or not. But these are like standards we're holding everybody to. Just bold. This is what you're accountable for. These are your roles. This is how you're going to be measured. This is how we listen. Explaining all that stuff up front, Ryan. Think about how powerful it is with your clients as you're bringing talent in, and if their clients to organize these stories, and then you're able to talk to the prospect. Hey, does this sound like a place you want to work? Because this is who they are. You get rid of all the problems up front.
We believe deeply in this, and that's why I shared the story earlier of like when I've gotten hiring wrong in the past, it's always been because they were not the right culture fit for the organization. And that's why like it's probably maybe 4 or 5 different parts to our vetting process, but we have 2 main interviews, and we spend an hour on a core values interview to make sure that the candidate's values align with the client's values.
We get those right, so much else goes better. So
100%. Like, the whole idea of like right person, wrong seat. Like, and I'm not insinuating that organizations should create seats needlessly, but there might be other seats in the organization that person can go to. But if you've got the wrong person, there's only one place they're going at that point.
No, what you do is you make another seat, you send them into another department.
That's what big corporations do.
Terrible.
So would you say that this promise, and like the reason I'm going down this path so much is because like now I feel like I got to take a round turn on some of the things that we're doing, because that was a big key takeaway for me in this. Besides, I want to implement your software now and have my team do your assessment. But besides that, like, are you insinuating that it's probably right around the same time that the offer comes, where it's like, hey, we're about to present an offer to you, and like this is where negotiations are going to start, but you need to hear me loud and clear on this, the promise?
I think it's starting before. Let me describe the job. Let me just describe working here, and you just say, we're making these 7 promises to everybody, and you describe them to them. It's like and there's a huge deep dive in accountable and measured and heard. There's like 14 points that I teach my clients to, here are your seats, here are your roles, here are the meetings you're going to be part of. Here's how you're measured short term, long term. Here's who you turn to be coached. Getting all that out in the open or super clear, Ryan, is kind of nerd stuff. But, laying it out, talking to them about, we have a promise to you. We want you to be able to say, I understand, embrace how I'm heard. And you're going to be you'll be honored with a level 10 meeting every week and a quarterly conversation. I'm coaching my clients to, in the interviews, to talk about, they aren't talking about EOS specifically, but they might say, we have these 7 critical needs, they're promises, and we keep the promise through our level 10, through our operating system. And I'll explain some of the tools when we go through through the interview. Once you get it, it's pretty. Once you see the way the tools align up to the critical needs, it just comes straight out with people who are EOS versed.
And the promise that we're making is the core values, and some of the things that you talked about. One of the, I forget the exact quote, but it had to do with, like, values are not industry specific, or there was another thing in there. So like, when an organization is trying to understand, like, let's say they're brand new, let's say like, they don't really have any core values, but the organization is successful in spite of itself, and you're coming through, like, how do we get to the root of the core values that are driving those actions and behaviors that are ultimately leading to the success?
Well, I kind of feel like most people, the founder already has the core has the core values already kind of baked into who they are, and you have a tendency early on to hire people who have those core values, and ultimately, I mean, all the Lencioni stuff of permission to play, accidental, aspirational. Are you talking about that model, Lencioni?
Just how to help an organization like articulate it. So let's say it is the founder, and I agree with you there. By the way, I do have a follow up that I've been pondering lately, but like the core behaviors of the founder are generally the initial values that set. So like how do you how do you come in and kind of look at all of these things that are happening and say and help the organization like actually articulate what they are?
That's a lot of that's the doing EOS. And we actually borrow a facilitation from Lencioni where he says you think of three employees you've had over the years that if everybody's the exact same way, you could take over the world, list their names, and then then you come in and you ask them to write down the attributes that you think of with these three people, and then you just do like a keep, kill, combine, and it comes out typically right. And then it's just facilitation, of watching the faces around the room, looking at the owner, seeing if he's ringing true over there, and helping them dig into the real words, and then helping them understand the words they're using can help them create a shorthand for managing and leading. Like yesterday, one of the clients, brand new, is a vision building one. They have the core value relationships. You know, and just somebody does something, and you say, "Well, Ryan, is that building a relationship? Yes or no?" I mean, it makes sense there. The values just need to be part of just being able to correct super quick, not in a negative way. I know this past 2 weeks, Cam, you're watching. I think I went to our core values in the Bite Seven world a couple of times just to gain alignment. It wasn't talking about strategy or tactics. It was just alignment to the values. If that answered that or not, Ryan, but when they're real, and you feel them. They can't be touchy feely words. They need to be internal words.
I just did a post on this morning. Like at Talent Harbor, and we did this at Hunt to Killer as well. But every single Friday we get the entire team together, and I think we've always called them firesides, regardless of the company. And like today's conversation, we always go over a core value. So one, we acknowledge or identify somebody in the organization that had a decision or an action that exhibited that core value. And then we just go deep. And so today we went deep on growth mindset, which is my absolute favorite. What is there a time where core values evolve? And I've been thinking about this question for a while now, but like, there's the early days where the core values is literally the founder's core values. And then maybe like the team grows a little bit. And so there's some other ideas or there's some other observations. Do you think an organization ever outgrows the founder's core values?
I think they're always going to be tied to them. They just might mature. I can't come up with a good way to explain what I would say mature, Ryan. But it's do I see it change a lot in terms once they lock them in and get them right? I don't see them changing a whole lot. Typically, they can evolve. Maybe the words. I know yesterday this team came in. They had 6 words, and we basically used the exact same stuff. We just cleaned some of the words up to mean more what they mean to communicate further out in the company. Is that what you're saying? I mean, the world of EOS, we challenge them every year, at least in the annual. Like one of the things I do a lot of times is the trick for implementers out there. When you can't remember the team members' names around the room and check in, you ask them to answer to do a check in. Good news personal, good news professional, what's working, what's not working. To your left, what is this person's most awesome core value fit? And so I think then they'll say, well, Ryan's most core value. It does 2 things. It reminds you of their name, and also like reinforces the core value. And I say you have to use their name. Sorry.
There's like a 30-second delay between the live stream, so I can't wait until Rob hears that one.
He can pass that on to his wife. She's the implementer.
Have you ever challenged a core value at the annual? And listen, I realize that EOS is supposed to be this like 2-year program and you graduate. I never subscribed to that notion. I thought that having a third party, an outside party in the room, on a continuing basis provides an enormous amount of value. So I'm assuming you've probably have some long-term clients that stayed past graduation. Are you have you ever challenged the core values at an annual and they've changed them or changed one or two of them?
I think the process brings that up. It's typically, I do this thing where they're called sandbags. So you know rocks. You know what a rock is. You know what a rock is, right?
Yeah, I know what a rock is.
So the model is water's the interruptions of life, sand's interruptions of work, pebbles are the amount of time your job takes, and rocks are the things that are you do if you have any time left over. When you do the model correctly. I ask my clients two questions. One's in the quarterly. I say, okay, let's think of all the sandbags that hit us in the last 90 days. And those sandbags, we start on day one and we set our rocks out 90 days. That's the exercise. But then there's stuff that hits us in that quarterly. Like we hit a sandstorm and it fills up a bag that has some Quikrete in it, gets a little bit wet. It ends up feeling like a rock. I call that a sandbag with my clients. And then the other thing I do, so that's in the quarterly, and then the annuals, I ask them, I'm reviewing the whole annual, what kind of sand trucks backed up and dumped on you in the last year? I mean, so it's that you didn't anticipate. And very often when you start digging into that big old pile of sand, it's people issues. And it's like, so where did the people issue come from? Was it that they did not get or won't have the capacity to do their roles, or is it just because your core values weren't clear enough? So that's when you challenge them. You let the tools work in order to them saying, hey, we let him go, and I can't tell you what core value he was violating, but you're like, okay, we need to work on the core values. Does that help at all? Yeah. I'll never say that core value sucks. We back into it.
We need to improve this. Let's think about this again. Um, okay. What is there anything that we haven't I can't believe, but like the hour has absolutely flown by, and I have two standard kind of outro questions that I'll ask you. But I want to make sure that like we touched on enough of the concepts of attract or repel and the 7 critical needs, and then because it's more than just the book and kind of your philosophy. Like you have a software platform, an actual assessment, like you got a lot of really interesting things going on. Is there anything that we haven't covered? Cam came with a question, but is there anything that we haven't touched on that you're like, I wish we would have went there?
Well, I think the natural place that it works on, if you're in an EOS journey, is like annual 2 or annual 3, where you're trying to go deeper in the team health and the trust builders. That's a natural place for it to come up. Really, you hit it, Ryan. I can't believe. I'm glad you followed that list I sent before the meeting. I'm joking. This really was this. Yeah, I think you. I've enjoyed the hour. It's been great. So I think you hit everything. Hopefully, people are getting served out there.
I know you've had some ringers especially for, so believe it or not, most of the people that download this podcast are all EOSIs. Like we thought we were going to get in front of ICPs. It's a whole bunch of amazing implementers that listen to it. And I think you've given quite a few amazing EOSI tips and tricks in here as well. Cam does have one question that it kind of builds off of the last one. And he says, how do you help a leadership team that thinks they're healthy just because they're performing well? And I think if I could add just a little bit of nuance to that, what I think he's getting at is like, they're actually not healthy, but they're productive, meaning like they're driving results and they're driving growth.
Yeah. So I don't need to make this up. This is lifted. I mean, lifted right off from EOS. Just lifted it straight from Patrick Lencioni, Cam. The 5 dysfunctions pyramid. So this is how we get from here to here, is through here. How you like that, Ryan? Okay, everybody's here.
Oh, that you've been working on that one. You've had those books there the whole conversation. This is good.
I have, and that's why this book exists. Is the CEO of Ben Bella, who published this book, said there's a gap between this book and this book, and this book fills it. But it's just it's uh teaching the bottom rung of the 5 dysfunctions, Cam. Vulnerability based trust. Without high levels of vulnerability based trust, you can't have open and honest debate, and without open and honest debate, you can't get commitment. Without commitment, you can't create accountability. Without accountability, you're not going to get really good results across the whole team. So it's just, EOS just sets this up beautifully. At the very beginning of an EOS journey, we talk about healthy and smart. Lencioni defines healthy as little to no confusion. That leads to little to no politics. It leads to high levels of morale and productivity and low turnover and key people. I mean, that just leads us straight into the 7 critical needs and how do you measure health throughout the whole organization. Did that help a little bit, Cam?
He won't see it for like 30, 45 seconds. Awesome. Let's so number one, what do you look for in a client? Are you still hopping on planes nowadays, or you're like, my clients come to me? Where are you at, and what are you looking for in your clients?
Yeah, so I am taking on clients. I graduate people, Ryan, that 18 months or whatever, and they graduate when they master it. Master it means they can teach it to other people. So I'm jumping on the plane with the right clients. I'm really trying to. I don't want to go 2 steps out. Going kind of down to Atlanta and stuff like that. But I'm taking clients who are interested in the 7 critical needs and are interested in EOS. Interestingly, I have a bunch of clients who've been through and have graduated EOS, and they're coming back and going, "Hey, we want to take it to the next level." We see the 7 critical needs as the way to get there. So I've got some of those clients working too.
Yeah, and with the 7 critical needs, just to be clear on the service that you provide there, because there's the software component. Do you actually come in and like implement it as well, and like walk the organization through the assessment of or the analysis of the results and things like that?
Yeah, just the leadership team. We train the leadership team to go out and do the communication. But the idea is it fits so well with like an implementer. If you're already implementing, you will get this stuff, and you should be able to work with your clients. We do have Chris Dawson is our head coach, and he's engaged with some clients that are non-EOS, and he goes in and trains them, does the assessment, does the debrief, calls them once a month, does all that kind of stuff too. So there's the sort of the 7 critical needs piece, which is basic, easy to teach inside of an EOS implementation. And then you have Bite 7 that sits over here, and it's kind of it's standalone like company. That wasn't clear, but both of them overlap and use the survey, the assessment. So it's just 7 question survey. Thank you, Ryan. You're trying to help me sell stuff. Appreciate
that. I'm here for you. Last question. So someone just listened to all this and they were like, Uncle Walt, already love the name. Number 2, number 2 or 3 or 2.5 or 3.5, somewhere in like the first 5 implementer ever, because there's like 1,000 of y'all now, and like you are like the OG inside of this ecosystem. So they heard that, and they heard all this amazing stuff that you're doing to be able to tie traction to the 5 dysfunctions of a team through your philosophy of attract and repel and some of these other things. All of that said, how would they get a hold of you?
Walt@waltbrown.co or Walt@bite7.com. But Walt Brown, I'll come up probably.
You should do an Uncle Walt email address. That would be awesome. Uncle Walt at.
I think you're right. I do. I'm embracing that brand more and more, Ryan.
I appreciate you staying. I've held you 3 minutes. Hopefully I didn't just jam you for another meeting. But I appreciate you coming on. We're gonna sign off here, and I'll catch you in the green room. But thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan.